For over 30 years, Charlotte had been the silent backbone of her family. At just 21, she married Henry, a small-town entrepreneur with big dreams but empty pockets. She gave up her aspirations, her career, and her independence to raise their son Caleb and support Henry's ambition. They built a modest life in Asheville, North Carolina, in a 2-story house that Charlotte kept spotless. She cooked every meal, folded every piece of laundry, and never once asked for praise. But on the day Ava, Caleb's wife, gave birth to their first child, Charlotte wasn't even told. No calls, no messages, just silence. She only found out from a neighbor. Still, she drove to the hospital and waited outside the delivery room for 24 hours, hoping to be let in. When she finally stepped in to check if the baby needed changing, Ava looked at her with disgust and asked if she washed her hands. Caleb and Henry just stood there silent. That night, Charlotte sat alone in the hospital parking lot, staring up at the stars. Her hands were blistered from years of labor, but her heart was what ached the most. That was the moment something inside her finally cracked. The next morning, Charlotte did something she'd never done before. She packed a suitcase and booked herself a one-way flight to Sedona, Arizona. When Henry came home and saw the suitcase, his eyes widened. "You're going on a trip?" he asked, incredulous. "Right after Ava gave birth. Who's going to take care of her and the baby?" Charlotte didn't even look up. "Apparently not me. I'm just the housekeeper, remember?" Caleb joined in, fuming. "Mom, are you serious right now? Ava's still recovering. This is when she needs you most. She's going to hate you for walking out." Charlotte's lips trembled, but she held her ground. "I've been the one watching your baby every night for the past 3 weeks, while Ava slept in peace. Did either of you once ask me if I was okay, if I needed rest? The first time I tried to change his diaper, your wife made me wear disposable gloves. Like I was dirty." Caleb opened his mouth to speak but faltered. "Mom, you're being sensitive." She turned to him, eyes sharp with years of suppressed pain. "Sensitive? Let me ask you something. Have you ever once introduced me to your friends as your mother? Or just as the lady who cooks your meals and scrubs your bathroom?" Silence. "I sacrificed everything so this family could thrive," she continued. "But the second I try to breathe, to do something for myself, I'm shamed for it." Henry finally broke in, irritated. "Charlotte, you're blowing things out of proportion. Just make that soup Ava likes, roast a chicken, and drop it off at the hospital. She needs nutrients. You know the food there is awful." Charlotte's heart clenched. After everything, the sleepless nights, the years of invisible service, this was her thanks. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "If you care so much about her nutrition, why don't you cook for her yourself?" Henry's eyes narrowed. "Don't start, you're emotional. Just do what needs to be done." That night, she didn't cook, she didn't clean, she sat outside on the porch for hours, watching the stars appear one by one. At 6:05 p.m., her phone rang. It was Caleb. "You're 5 minutes late, where's the dinner? What the hell are you trying to pull?" Charlotte answered calmly. "I'm your mother, not your maid. If Ava didn't eat today, maybe you should ask yourself what you're doing as her husband." There was silence on the other end. Then anger. "You've lost your mind, I'll have Dad talk to you." Before he could say another word, Charlotte hung up. Then, she did something she never thought she'd have the courage to do. She blocked both their numbers. For the first time in decades, she chose herself. Charlotte had barely folded 2 shirts into her suitcase when a knock came at the door. It was Mr. Langley, Henry's driver, looking concerned. "Ma'am, Dawson's been calling nonstop. He thought something happened and asked me to check on you." Before she could respond, he handed her the phone. Henry's voice came through, sharp and annoyed. "Charlotte, enough with the drama. You haven't taken a real vacation in 20 years and now you decide it's time. Really? You know Ava can't stand the smell of cooking oils. But she still loves your lemon herb chicken. Are you going to let her go hungry out of spite?" Charlotte's grip tightened around the phone. Her voice dropped, low and icy. "Henry, am I your wife, or is Ava's mother? Because from where I stand, I'm expected to slave away while she lives like royalty. If her appetite matters so much to you, maybe you should cook for her yourself." There was a pause before Henry snapped. "You're delusional. You need help." He hung up. Charlotte stood frozen for a moment. Then, with eerie calm, she turned to Mr. Langley. "You might be getting more calls about me soon. If either of them asks where I am, tell them this. If I dropped dead today, it still wouldn't be any of their business." He looked stunned, then slowly nodded and left. That night, neither Caleb nor Henry came home. For the first time in 30 years, Charlotte didn't call to check on them. She didn't prep meals, didn't check for folded socks, didn't ensure the ass was set at Caleb's preferred temperature. Instead, she sat alone in the garden, surrounded by the scent of blooming jasmine. The stars blinked overhead like tiny witnesses to her awakening. By 9:45 p.m., she was already in deep sleep. The next morning, Charlotte woke at 5:00 a.m. She washed up, put on her running shoes, still pristine after years of neglect, and stepped out into the cool morning air. Neighbors looked at her with wide eyes. "Charlotte," one asked, "you're out early." Normally, she'd still be inside making Henry's breakfast, triple-checking Caleb's work clothes, and planning the day's grocery list. But today she ran. 40 minutes nonstop. Sweat rolled down her temples, but it wasn't exhaustion, it was release. When she got home, she showered, made herself a hearty breakfast, and sat under the pergola listening to music she hadn't played in years. Then, on a whim, she opened her phone. A new photo from Ava's mom, Cynthia, popped up on social media. Charlotte's eyes widened. There was Henry, her husband, in their kitchen, cheerfully plating a lavish dinner for Cynthia and Ava. Another photo, Henry gently brewing coffee for Cynthia, smiling like a man in love. Beneath the photos, comment after comment praised Henry. "Such a devoted man. Cynthia, you're so lucky." Charlotte stared for a long time before typing a single line beneath the post. "Married over 30 years, and this is the first time I've learned my husband knows how to cook. What a shame I've never had the pleasure." Charlotte barely had time to put down her coffee when the front door flew open. Henry stormed in, red-faced. What the hell was that comment? "Charlotte." She didn't flinch. She set her mug down gently. "That's a question I should be asking you." He ripped off his tie, tossing it to the floor. "You're jealous. That's what this is about. You didn't want to cook for Ava, so I did. Cynthia's upset now. She's crying, thanks to you." Charlotte chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Crying? What did I say that wasn't true?" Henry snapped. With one angry motion, he flipped the table. Her breakfast, scrambled eggs, fresh bread, sliced fruit, crashed to the ground, a mess of color and effort, instantly forgotten. And that's when it hit her. That food, that was her. Years of labor, carefully prepared, and still treated like garbage when it no longer served them. Charlotte didn't move. Her stillness unnerved him. Henry tried to salvage his anger with authority. "Everything I do is for this family, for Caleb, for us." But his voice wavered. She looked up slowly, her voice like glass. "I've been nothing but the engine behind this house. For over 3 decades. And yet you. Both of you. Only remember I exist when dinner isn't served." He faltered. "Charlotte, this isn't the time. Ava and Cynthia need you right now." She leaned forward slightly. "I am not your household staff. When did I become a woman who exists solely to serve your needs? You've said it yourself before. I don't compare to other women. Do you think I forgot that?" Henry opened his mouth but nothing came out. "Funny," she said, her tone calm but razor sharp. "Because when you were pitching your first business, I was the one staying up with you, helping you prepare every word of your presentation." Henry tried to regain control. "You're being dramatic." "No." Charlotte whispered, her eyes glistening. "I'm being awake." She picked up the shattered mug off the floor, one she'd bought during a long-forgotten anniversary trip, and placed it in the trash. Then, without looking at him, she added, "By the way, next Tuesday. That's the day I leave for my trip." Henry looked like he'd been slapped. "You're still going, even with everything going on?" Charlotte turned to him and smiled, soft and sad. "You told me to take a break, didn't you? But what you really meant was cool off and come back to work." He said nothing. She stepped past him, the tension in the air suffocating. In the other room, her phone buzzed again. A message from Caleb. "Mom, Ava really needs your cooking next week. I've made a list of what she and Cynthia prefer. Don't forget to prepare it early, just in case she's in a mood again." Charlotte stared at the screen. And for the first time in her life, she didn't respond. Charlotte stood in line at the airport, her suitcase steady by her side when her phone rang again. It was Henry. "Where are you?" he demanded. "At the airport," she said flatly. "Wait there. Caleb's on his way. He's bringing Grandma." Before she could reply, she saw them, Caleb pushing her frail mother in a wheelchair. "Grandma, please talk some sense into her. Mom's losing it." Going on vacation at a time like this. Charlotte's heart ached. Her mother's health wasn't great. But what hurt more was seeing her child manipulate it for guilt. But her mom didn't fall for it. With a soft wave of her hand, the elderly woman looked up at her daughter. Sweetheart, go. If anyone deserves this break, it's you. If you decide to divorce him, your father and I are with you. Charlotte's lips trembled as she nodded. She walked past them. When Caleb reached for her arm, she pulled away. That flight to Montana was the most liberating moment of her life. She wasn't just leaving her home, she was leaving behind the woman she had become. Always small, always secondary. The moment the plane touched down, the vast sky and endless plains welcomed her like open arms. Her guide, a kind-eyed local named Owen, picked her up in a dusty jeep. "Welcome to Big Sky Country," he said. "Let's help you breathe again." And breathe she did. For the first time in years, Charlotte didn't hear anyone calling for her. No demands, no expectations. Just the rustle of wind, the rhythm of hooves on dry earth, and her own heartbeat, steady and present. She rode horses across golden fields at sunrise, drank sweet black coffee on a porch overlooking the hills, ate fresh cooked meals under starlit skies, savoring every bite without needing anyone's approval. One afternoon, Owen took her to a small town festival. Laughter, music, and friendly strangers. She danced, she laughed. Someone even complimented her smile, something no one had done in years. One morning, she woke before dawn and stood alone in a dewy field as the sun crept over the hills. And she whispered, "I am still here." That night, she journaled for the first time in decades. Each word came pouring out like a dam breaking: grief, anger, regret, but also gratitude. Gratitude for the strength that now pulsed through her. She realized something powerful in that quiet Montana morning. She hadn't been running away. She'd been reclaiming herself. Her phone buzzed again. It was Caleb. A dozen messages. Photos of Ava and the baby. Requests, demands, guilt-laced bribes. She deleted the messages and turned off her phone. The next morning, she sat with Owen by the fireplace, sipping tea. He looked at her and said, "Whatever storm you came from, you left it behind." Charlotte smiled. "I didn't leave the storm behind," she said softly. "I learned to dance in it." Charlotte returned home from Montana glowing in a way no one had seen in years. The old her, the quiet, accommodating woman everyone overlooked, was gone. In her place stood a woman with clarity in her eyes and steel in her spine. She didn't go back to Henry's mansion. Instead, she moved into the modest cottage her parents had left her. It was small, but every inch of it whispered peace and autonomy. She painted the walls in soft, calming colors, filled the shelves with books she loved, and planted lavender and rosemary in the front garden. The scent followed her everywhere. A symbol of new beginnings. She began each day with sunrise yoga on the porch. Her body had aged, yes, but she moved with a grace earned from years of quiet endurance. Then she'd jog through the local park, where neighbors now greeted her with surprise, remarking on her transformation. "You look lighter," one said, like something heavy finally let go. In truth, Charlotte had been reborn. One day, she walked into a local cafe where she'd once only passed by while running errands for Henry. She now sat down and ordered a cappuccino. Alone, unhurried, a stranger complimented her earrings. Another woman sitting nearby struck up a conversation. It turned into an hour of laughter and shared stories. It was the first time in decades she felt seen. Not for what she did, but for who she was. Word eventually spread in town that Charlotte had filed for divorce. Most people were shocked. Some whispered. But Charlotte didn't care. She had spent too long giving weight to others' opinions. Now, her only compass was her own well-being. Susan, her childhood friend and longtime confidant, showed up one afternoon with a bottle of wine and a big idea. "Let's open that art and wellness studio we always talked about." Charlotte hesitated only for a second before nodding. Why not? They rented a small but sunlit space downtown and began renovating it. Susan handled the business side while Charlotte brought in her design flair. They named it the Nest, a symbol of healing and rebirth. As the days passed, Charlotte began receiving texts and calls again. Caleb sent photos of the baby with captions like, "He misses you," and "Amber's not the same without your food." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Their silence when she needed them spoke louder than any apology could. Henry, meanwhile, remained quiet. But Charlotte could feel him watching, waiting, expecting her to cave. She didn't. Instead, she leaned into this new life. She began teaching beginner yoga classes at the Nest and led weekend workshops on self-care for women over 40. Her story spread, quietly inspiring others. some in marriages that stifled them, others who had long abandoned their dreams. Charlotte had once lived for everyone else. But now, finally, she was living for herself. 6 months had passed since Charlotte walked out of that suffocating life. And not once had she looked back. On New Year's Eve, she and Susan stood on the rooftop of the Nest, wrapped in cozy shawls, champagne in hand, watching fireworks bloom over the city skyline. It was their studio's soft opening, and the turnout had exceeded all expectations. Women from all walks of life, single mothers, recent retirees, even a few quiet husbands, had come to see what this sanctuary was all about. Charlotte raised her glass. To freedom, she said. To second chances, Susan clinked hers against it with a smile. And to never letting anyone dim your light again. Back at home, Charlotte lit candles around her bathtub, sank into the warm water, and let the peace wash over her. No cries for help. No orders barked from across the house. No one expecting a meal or a miracle. Just silence. Just self. One morning, she received a handwritten letter. It was from her old neighbor, Mrs. Gladstone, who had watched her leave months ago with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of sorrow. I've lived through 2 wars, 5 children, and a husband who never believed in me. The letter read. But watching you reclaim your life gave me courage. At 81, I finally signed up for my first painting class. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. This was her legacy now. Not a perfectly kept house, not spotless laundry or roasted chicken on time, but quiet strength. She had no need to prove herself anymore. She had become herself. Caleb eventually stopped trying to contact her. Amber moved back in with her own parents. Henry still played the devoted grandfather in public, but Charlotte saw the truth in his eyes the last time their paths crossed at the courthouse. A man who had lost something irreplaceable and couldn't admit it. He had come to offer her a ride again, flowers in hand. She had taken one look at the wilted petals and simply said, "Don't try to fix with gestures what you broke with silence." She left him standing there, again. As spring arrived, Charlotte took her parents on a trip to Lake Tahoe, another dream they had shelved for too long. Her mother, wrapped in a fuzzy white coat, kept pointing out how blue the water was. Her father wept quietly the first time they stood at the lake's edge. "Thank you," he whispered, "for finally choosing yourself." That night, Charlotte sat under a starlit sky, wine glass in hand, journal open on her lap. She wrote only one sentence: "I am no longer waiting for someone else to choose me." Because now, she had chosen herself. And that changed everything. Sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't staying, it's leaving. Charlotte spent 3 decades sacrificing her dreams for people who never saw her as more than convenience. She folded her identity into laundry loads and dinner plates. But in reclaiming her voice, she discovered something even more powerful than forgiveness: freedom. You can pour yourself into a role for years, hoping one day they'll notice. But when that day never comes, you have a choice. You can keep shrinking, or you can walk away, not in anger but in clarity. The people who truly love you won't need your silence to feel secure. They'll rise with you. Her story teaches us, you are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not broken because they didn't value your worth. You are simply evolving, and that evolution, no matter how late, is still your right. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, Charlotte's story is your mirror and your map. Maybe you're a mother, a wife, a daughter, juggling roles so heavy you forgot your own name. Start small. Reclaim an hour each day for yourself. Read, walk, journal. Speak up when something hurts. Set limits with kindness, not guilt. Seek support, whether it's from a friend, a therapist, or a new community. And if your peace threatens someone else's comfort, that's their lesson, not yours. You don't need to burn down bridges. But you do need to stop crossing ones that only lead you away from yourself. Life is too short to keep waiting for appreciation that may never come. Choose yourself now, before you forget how.